been an escrow. Now we're really in trouble with fire.
Pardon?
I escrow officer for 22 years now, almost 23.
Oh, I
And
hope it's hard to do it when it's recorded because you forget.
I think you guys are gonna need to mute yourselves. We can hear somebody talking. So, one of the things that I do get on a soapbox about is trust. It's just one of those things. And it's really funny because a lot of times people think that, oh, you're just an escrow officer, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. The attorney knows what you're talking about. And I'm like, you know, they told us this will thing is going to work for us and everything else. And at the end of the day, I'm right. Don't mean to be mean, but I'm the right one. So, you know, when it comes down to the vesting of a property, you know, we're the ones that have it. It's where the buck stops. So, what I will say is, when we have a buyer and seller.
Yeah, you know, I gotta get off.
Good job, silly. Anyway, so what will happen is, when we deal with buyers and sellers, we deal with them completely differently. Okay, so let's go start. You know, we'll do our little next slide here. So this is our promo. Start in here is my new favorite thing. It has changed the way we do our escrows. It gathers information that helps us with our escrow transaction. A lot of people think, oh my gosh, it's just one more email, but it has changed how smooth a transaction runs. And initially I was like this, oh sheesh, another encrypted email. But it really, you know, it helps us gather the information from the buyer. It helps us gather information from the so, and it helps us initiate conversations that we might not have had until day 20 of a 30-day escrow. And sometimes we need depending on the problem, we need to have every day that we can possibly get. So, let's talk about our agenda. Today, we're going to cover the documents we will need for verification. We're going to cover who can sign as a buyer or a seller, the rules for the tax, you know, the 593 and the 1099, so franchise tax board and the state and the IRS. We're going to talk about dispersing of funds, which I talk about all day, every day. We're going to talk about dealing with somebody who is deceased, who is the trustee of a trust. And then any other challenges that we might have to closing. And then, if you know, at the end, if you guys have any questions here locally, you can just tell me what the question is. If you have a question, you guys can put it in the chat. Okay, so that's what we know about that. So let's go to the next slide, please. So why do people put their properties in a trust? Partly it's because they don't want to hear me talk about it over and over and over again. And they just relent. They can't handle it anymore because that's how much I talk about trust. So we're going to avoid Christy Kutka and we're going to avoid probate. And we're going to also establish a clear succession plan for real estate assets. Okay. So that probate thing's a major deal. That succession plan, major deal. Okay, so we'll be talking about that. So if you are selling in a trust, or when you go out to a listing appointment, we always recommend that you go and you pull the most recent deed. Now, what I'll tell you, a lot of people, they will do that. The worst part about all this is that they will not gather some very important information. I have customers that I have trained now, i.e. Kerry Matsunaga is one of them. And it just happened recently where properties in a trust. He did not, when he pre-opened the file, he came to me and said, hey, Christy, it's in a trust. Here are the trust papers. Because Kerry even though he understands trust, he is not the one that's going to give the thumbs up or the thumbs down if who can sell the property, according to the trust. I take the trust papers and I send them directly to the title department for them to approve. Well, it's not even me. I've been doing this for, 20 plus years as an escrow officer, and I'm not even going to sit down and interpret what the trust papers say. I'm going to let the title officer do just that. So what will happen is Carrie recognized that it's in a trust. When he went out to he can't even get somebody to sign yet until we know who can sign on behalf of the trust. He can't even get his listing agreement signed until we figure out who can sign. So I love it. I'm always entertained when this is who we had sign it with their power of attorney. Well, that doesn't work most of the time. So I've had people who have been in our industry for some time now, and they have gone out and had this listing agreement signed and the purchase agreement signed, only to realize that they never had the right to do that. You do not have an executed contract. Okay. And it's all because, you didn't type the additional information. So that it's a giant mess, especially when a lot of times we've lost a handful of days because that it wasn't done the proper way. So, be sure to get a copy of the deed. Be sure to get a copy of the trust. Be sure to send it to your escrow officer. The escrow officer will in turn send it to the title department. I will get back to you once the title department, and normally it's within like a day. And I just give you the information who can sign on behalf of the trust. And we can mess with things. Sometimes there's people who cannot sign anymore, and then we have to go down the road of how do we get the right person. That's what we just had recently. How do we get the right person to sign the papers? So next one is who is on title vesting. Some lenders will not allow for a trust to acquire real estate. And some will and some won't. Often the acquisition will be in the name of the individuals and the property will be placed in the trust following the close of escrow. So normally, ideally, how about that? Ideally, we always like it that if somebody's buying a piece of property, we can put it in their trust. There are additional steps that have to be taken in order to put it in the trust. Mr. Schilling probably attest to this right now. So, so what would happen is, I always point when the buyer comes to me and says, hey, I want to take title in my trust, I point them straight to the lender. I need you to get with your lender immediately. There's going to be additional paperwork that you need to supply to them that needs to go to the underwriting department. It's the easiest way to do things. If we can do it that way, even jumping through the hoops in the beginning, it's still easier than doing it after the close, because after the close, that means they have to remember to put it into their trust. And a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but the last time I moved, that was the last thing I was worried about the refrigerator that I just bought. I was not worried about my vesting and how I held title. And so it's almost like you just want to get it done so you don't have to worry about it later on. So my suggestion, if your buyer wants to do that, immediately point them in the right direction. So what documents do we need for verification? If we're working with the original trustee of the trust, okay, so I have a trust. It's the Christina Kutka Family Trust. I am the trustee of my trust. If I go to sell my house, they do not need anything but identification that shows that I am Christina Kutka. If I passed away and my successor trustee was now in charge of signing the paperwork, she would need to supply to the title company the first page of the trust, the page of the trust that says that she's the successor trustee, the signature page on the trust, and then the notary page also. We're not going to, a lot of people get a little wonky when we say we need a copy of the whole trust because they don't want to They don't want to share all the information with us. Little do they know, we don't care about the rest of the information. We only want what we want. So, you know, but I'm not gonna force anybody to give me, you know, the whole thing. Just give me what I need. A lot of people don't understand what, they'll look at me with that blank vacant stare though, when I say these are the pages that I need. And so, we'll have the customer come in, you know, and that goes for, you know, again, before you even open the transaction, we can be having these conversations, you know what I mean, together. Because there's nothing worse than getting 20 days down the road and realizing you don't have the right person signing your paperwork. So, and then we want to get these documents as soon as possible. So let's talk about, in this case, your seller is not the trustee. Your seller is not the successor trustee. Your seller is the trust. Okay. Mental, you know, we have to keep in mind, these trusts are like, they're entities. Okay. There are people signing on behalf of the entities, right? Like a corporation or an LLC. Same thing with buyers, right? So if a buyer is buying in their trust, we need to have the name of the trust. They are the signers on behalf of the trust. So a lot of times we see contracts, and I'm not going to get nitpicky on that whole thing, right? But the reality is that you don't want, when it comes down to a buyer, you know, taking title or anything like that, they're not taking title as trustees. The trust is taking title. They are signing on behalf of the trust. Okay, so we'll open the order based off of that they're the trustees, but we will need sooner than later, in order to draw our paperwork, in order to make sure that we have the correct, you know, trust and all that kind of stuff, we will need a copy of the trust paperwork, or you know, if it's a buyer that's buying, we only need a trust certification. We just need to know how the trust reads. And we need to make sure it's real. It's like not like what I did earlier about, you know, the name of my trust is the Christina S. I don't know if it's the family trust. I don't know what day it's dated. I don't know any of that stuff. This is not the time to be guessing what the name of my trust is. We need to have a real deal. So that's what we have. So and a lot of people will call me and ask me if I have a copy of that trust, you know, when it's a seller, and a lot of times I don't, because I don't need it, and I'm not going to collect information that I traditionally don't need. So and that's it. So deeds of trust. So if your client is successor trustee, they often lack knowledge about the old deeds of trust. They may assume the deed of trust is paid, only to find out on a preliminary report that it is still open, and we have to work on that. So that's a whole nother thing. Old deeds of trust with private beneficiaries. This is like, you know, this is kind of standard. A lot of times people don't realize that when you pay off a loan and it's like a seller carryback or a private individual, there's a whole process that needs to happen, that you have to go back to the title company along with the original documents and get those, or, you know, a reconveyance done and all that kind of good stuff. Well, a lot of people don't go that extra step, right? And we get down to the nitty gritty, and, you know, grandma's deceased, and now there's this like deed of trust from, you know, 1982 for $50,000, and we have to figure out how to do this. Well, unfortunately, grandma's passed away, and now we're in big trouble. So, you know, and there's definitely ways around that. And, you know, one is go through grandma's paperwork and pray, say a little prayer while you're going through grandma's paperwork, that you know, the paperwork that you didn't throw away already when you purchased the house. So that the paperwork's in there, and if it isn't in there, oh gosh, there's the worst part. We got to get a bond, and that is a little time consuming, you know, and that's one of those things that, but I want to close in 10 days. That's sorry, you're not going to close in 10 days because there's loan against the property, and now we got to get a bond, and it's going to take, you know, a month and a half. So, but this is what, no, we can't do that. So we have to put everybody on notice that there's a loan and it's being paid off. And, you know, what you always, you know, our first thing is that we want to go back and we want to find out if the person who lent the money in the first place is still alive. if they're alive, they can sign a document called the substitution of trustee and deed of reconveyance that basically says the loans are paid in full. Now, if they're deceased, you know, the only thing you can hope for in that case is maybe it was held in a trust that way too, and somebody can sign on their behalf. But even then, they're gonna be like, maybe I am owed more money, you know, and it's a whole mess. Okay. Tax reporting requirements. Nope, is that it? I'm just. Then, oh yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's very fun. So, we're going to, when it's all said and done, the trustee, not the successor trustee, if the trustee is still the trustee, we're going to give a 1099 to the individual when we close. Okay, because they're the beneficiaries and all that kind of good stuff. If there is a successor trustee, then we have to deal with the tax consequences based off the trust. Does that make sense? Because the individual, most of the time people do not file their taxes in their trust. They file their taxes in individuals, right? So the money is coming to them directly through the trust, you know, when we close escrow. But I always tell people, you know, when you're selling, you're the successor trustee. And the when they're inheriting through the trust, there will be tax consequences to the trust. So you don't want to disperse all your money and be stuck potentially with a tax liability. So you kind of have to keep that in the back of your mind. Okay.
So we talked about the fact that people get confused because they don't think there's an inheritance tax. There is still a tax on the real estate transaction.
Yeah, so you just got to keep that in mind. Don't, you know, my suggestion is always talk to your tax professional when you are selling as a successor trustee, you know what I mean? Shoot, with every transaction, make sure that you're not going to get dinged and that there's no surprises at the end of the day, you know, so, you know, always check it out. So next one is, that's our 593. This is the franchise tax board form. Most of the time, you know, you fill out that top part and stuff like that. And the first box is, was it your principal residence within the tax code, what, 121 or something like that. And that basically says, has it been your principal residence for 2 or more years out of the last 5? Which most of the time, most of our transactions that I handle are exactly that. There's other ways out of it, and that is, was it your principal residence for, you know, 1 day out of the last 5, you know, so that's item number 2. There's a loss statement in there if you're selling it and you haven't, you've lost money on the deal and stuff like that. So different ways of calculating. Again, we deal with this form when it comes down like as individuals, when they are the trustee. When they're successor trustees, then we have to deal with the trust. And there's a potential, you know, that if they cannot prove that, because a lot of times when they're selling the house, when we see it, a lot of times, they're just trying to get rid of the property. Grandma passed away about 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and now we're just trying to, you know, disperse everything that she owned. And they would have to figure out, like, there's page 2 of this document, which Jen, you'll flip it. Page 2 has the calculations on there on the left hand side. So basically, you know, you can show how much money you actually lost in the transaction if this was an investment property for grandma. So, and then there's a sign and date, and it goes on page 3 and stuff like that. So that is what we know about that. Just understand that we have to deal with the tax man no matter what. Okay. So disbursement of funds. This is just, gosh, it's my like arch nemesis. And I get it, but I'm not kidding. I feel like a broken record with this because people think I really have a way around this, and I do not. for the last time, have a way around this. So when we sell a piece of property, okay, please note I use the word sell, okay? When we sell a piece of property, we have to make the check payable to whoever owns the property. So we go back to that first page of preliminary report, and if it says the trust name, that is who we're gonna be making the check payable to. So hypothetically speaking, you go out and you take this listing and they're in a trust, you need to tell them, because their escrow officer is going to be a broken record about it. You need to tell them that they need to have an account in the name of their trust. They really get very upset. Yesterday, my little lady that I talked to, she was not thrilled about the fact that I was going to be making that check payable or her wire payable to the trust. Now, she thinks that she has an investment account in the name of the trust, but she was going to go check that out today. She's not going to be very happy when because she was already a little stressed out. Now, can you imagine how much nicer it would have been if she would have known even before she put this house on the market that she needed to have an account in the name of the trust? I mean, it probably would have been the difference between, you know, one more thing on her plate that just bubbles her over, right? So in this case, she's going to check, but what I will tell you is sometimes it's a fairly easy process. Like for me, when I went and opened up my trust account, because I did not need a trust account, mind you. I did not, I was not selling a piece of property. I was not buying a piece of property. I was traveling a little bit there for a second, and they wanted to make sure that money in my bank account would go straight to my kids. So I made sure that my personal account's in the name of the trust. All I had to do though is bring the trust paperwork into the bank, and they were able to blanket my account, my personal account, in with my trust account. And it was all, I mean, it was maybe an hour of my life that I lost. It really wasn't that big of a deal. I knew where my trust paperwork was, and it was simple. A lot of people are like, this is very inconvenient. I'm sorry. And it doesn't, the worst part about it is that it doesn't have to be really inconvenient. It can be like a pretty easy slam dunk kind of situation, but unfortunately they don't know about what they don't know. So open up, my whole thing is that I have trust. I make sure that my account's already done. So, period. Because I don't want to be dealing with it when I'm stressed out. Do we have any questions or anything like that I need to be aware of?
There are no questions in the chat. So at this point, I would invite our Zoom attendees to unmute themselves if they have a question, or if someone in our live audience has a question. If there's any specific scenarios or weird things that you've run into, we're here for it.
I'll tell a little story that I had not too long ago go on. So I had a piece of property where the lender was an individual, and he had a trust. He was not the beneficiary of the loan in the trust. He passed away. The seller, he passed away during my transaction, mind you. The seller was already, it was a family friend. So he was already a little messed up, and I was like, we got a little problem here. Your family friend was your lender. And so within the trust, thank heavens, there was a provision that said, if we miss any assets, we can put it into the trust. There's this thing called the Hagstag order. You have to go to the courts and stuff like that. It's not easy peasy, but there was a lot of money at stake, and it would have been a tax nightmare for his heirs had we made that check. Mind you, it would have, if we didn't get it, if he didn't have that trust on the sidelines, it would have had to go through probate, his assets. If we would have had to go through probate, we couldn't be able to close our escrow transaction in a timely manner. The repercussions just kept on swirling and swirling. So fortunately, we were able to get the attorney for the estate to talk to our underwriting department, and it all worked out. But it could have been a stinking nightmare had we not had that on the sidelines. So this trust thing, I was talking, because when you're an ex-crosser, you go out with your girlfriends and you talk about trust. It's really important. If you have assets, what you want to do, if you want your estate to go to, and you don't want it going to the state, you want to go it to the people that you care about. So it's super important to establish, this trust now, especially when you're not sick, make it happen. There's no stress about it. We do have people that we work with on a regular basis. If you guys need a person to call, I've got a little list that I have accumulated over the years that just said, call these people. And every attorney is a little different. Some charge more, some charge less. Some give you a nice, pretty binder. Some give you like the papers and say, hey, here it is. But, along with those papers, they have the health directive. They have all these things. A will does not cover what we need.
So Christy, what if the successor trustee and the original trustee have passed away and nobody thought to update the trust? Does it mean that there basically isn't a trust?
No, there's still a trust. I think that they have to establish, I bet you money they're gonna have to go back to the courts to establish who can sign on behalf of that trust. I bet you it's probably very similar. Like, I don't think that there's gonna be tax consequences, but I think that there will be at least a process, I bet, to get to that place.
I think it's almost like probate.
I bet you it's very similar to probate though, because they have to go through the mix to find out who is, the next responsible party.
Hey, Christy, Jennifer, can I ask a question? Shannon here.
Yeah.
Hey, Christy, you had a slide up a couple slides ago about dispersing to a trust bank account, and you couldn't disperse directly to the person who's the current trustee. So the question I have for you, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but is it not permitted to disperse directly to the trustee because is that a taxable event of some kind?
It is our company policy because, when all that real estate fraud was going on, we basically took the stance of we only make the check payable to who the seller is. End of story. And it's because if I know for a fact, Shannon, you were around then, and all that craziness that was going on. You take the check payable here, and that's how the real estate fraud took place, right?
Yeah.
So we have made that stance that that's how it is. There's one other thing that I forgot to put a little caveat to. I said sell. Now, when you are refinancing, and I don't know why, but when you are refinancing and you can prove that you're borrowing in the trust, you are the beneficiaries of the trust. Clearly, you're still alive. Because the lender's done all their checking and everything out. We have been able, because of that purpose, we've been able to cut the check back to the buyer as individuals. Go figure. But only for refinance. So. But yeah, so that's the bottom line.
So that's a title company policy, not necessarily a law of some point or.
Well, the lenders, that's where the problem is. The lenders, for the buyer. They really, in many ways, those lenders rule the roost. They, and I'm not saying you rule the roost all the time, but a lot of times you. So what happens is the people that the underwriters, they want to show, they want us to make sure that we're not playing any funny business. We're not, there's no straw buyers, straw sellers, all this kind of stuff. We have to be very transparent about what we do in our transactions.
I think another caveat we would say is if your clients bought property and then created a trust and put the property in the trust, make sure that they put the right property.
Well, it's so funny. It's really interesting, you say that, but I had literally a transaction I'm currently working on actually, where the sweet little attorney used the wrong legal description. So now I'm having to gather up the documents. It's not a big deal. It's totally fixable. But we're getting the original documents back. We're having them re-signed, re-recorded, so we can prove and correcting the legal description, because you know, we were able to show what the intent was. But you know, you kind of have to make it right too, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Christy, can you hear me? This is Brad.
Hi, Brad.
Maybe we've answered this already, but somebody is in the chat said, what should be considered before placing real estate in a trust? Did we address that already?
So, what should be thought, you know, the first thing is, you know, when you go, your attorney's gonna give you a whole long laundry list of things that you need to bring with you to establish this trust, you know, they're gonna give you the items that you need to think about and all that kind of good stuff. So, once you decide, you know, that you're going to establish this trust, you need to gather all of your assets and make sure that, you know, you can get a copy with us, a copy of your grant deed. So you can provide that to the attorney so they know what the legal description is. So do you think that's what they're looking at, Red?
I'm not sure. Deborah, you want to add anything to that?
Am I missing something?
Deborah, are you still there? You can unmute yourself.
So, yeah, so that, I mean, the bottom line is that your attorney's gonna give you a list of all the things that you need to have available, so. Carrie wants to know, did you have a question?
No, I just thought maybe you want to talk about where our transaction had a durable power of attorney.
Oh, yes,
And
we
a
can talk
trust.
about that,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so,
content.
yeah, so there's a little bit more of it, so. We just had a transaction recently, and originally when they were meeting with Carrie, the conversation was, it's okay though, I have a power of attorney for my mom, who was the trustee of her trust. Well, I have to, again, we gather, you cannot just say, oh, great, and just have them sign, because what you have to do, again, is that you have to gather the trust, review the trust, because I have to follow exactly what the trust says. And 9 times out of 10, a trust and a power of attorney do not go hand in hand. If it does not specifically say that you can use the power of attorney within the confines of this trust, we have to go a whole nother route. We have to decide a couple of things. And in this case, we had to, you know, because the trustee of the trust was not capable of making decisions at this point. So within the trust, typically, it says that we have to establish who the successor trustee is and why the existing trustee cannot sign on their own behalf. So a trustee can resign, hypothetically speaking. I could just decide I don't want to do anything else, and I could sign a paperwork saying I am resigning as my own trustee and put somebody else, go to my paperwork, and they would have to do all my paperwork. Would that be like kind of nice revenge at this point, huh? So with that being said, I can either voluntarily resign if I have all my wits about me. If I do not have my wits about me, and a lot of times the trust says I have to have there has to be 2 doctor's notes confirming that I do not have the capability of making any more decisions on my own. Normally it's 2. Every once in a while it's 1, but for the most part it's 2. And then after that, after we have established that this existing trustee is not capable of making decisions on their own, what we can do is we'll draw up a document stating that there is a new trustee, i.e. a successor trustee. So just because they say I have a power of attorney, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them.
You can say, great, I'll take a copy of that and submit it to my escrow office.
And she's gonna come to it, ask me for how long to do this, the things that she needs. Yeah, you can play that. You can let me be the backup. I don't.
Yeah, we're not asking any realtors to be experts in
No.
deciding trusts. We're just trying to make sure everyone's aware of the necessary paperwork to make it easier on everybody. Ask a couple questions, get a couple copies, then throw it all our way and we'll sort and sift through it to help you.
And, you know, my whole thing is that I know that that's an uncomfortable situation. I mean, I 100% get it. At the end of the day, though, we have to have the proper documentation. And if you think, I mean, a lot of people are like, I just went and got the signature on the listing agreement, and I'm like, well, now you're gonna have to go back and get it again because they didn't sign it with the right capacity. They're not the power attorney, they're the successor trustee. You know what I mean? It's just easier to do it the right way the first time. So even if you're having a conversation when you're gonna go out and list a piece of property, you know, with somebody, you say, so, you know, I noticed that you're in a trust. We're gonna need a copy of that the trust paperwork to submit to the title department, so we can confirm who can sign on behalf of the trust. Oh, I can. Well, unfortunately, we're gonna need the title department to approve that. And I don't want you to be rushing around at the last minute. This is gonna make your life a lot easier. Well, I don't know where my trust paperwork is. Well, we're gonna need that. You're gonna need that paperwork before you list that house. You don't want to be, you know, taking their word for it, and then oh, I don't know where my trust paperwork is.
Then you have a whole bunch of other people that are not happy.
It's not good. It's not good. And you know, a lot, and you can go down the road, even, you know, when they're like, oh, and then they'll be able to make the checks payable to all the beneficiaries. I make the check payable to the trust, and that's it. Any disbursement beneficiaries happens outside. So
I have another question, if you guys don't mind. Yeah, Christy, in your professional opinion, you know, having to deal with all these moving parts in a trust, how much extra time does it require beyond, say, a projected close of escrow? It sounds like this might take maybe 5 to 10 days.
no, you know, Shannon, we deal with trusts all the time. It literally is just another layer on there. And if everybody's playing along and that, you know, you have the documentation, when I tell you that I can, you know, if like Carrie was able to call, you know, before we even opened up the stinking deal in the first place. And I think that it did
a couple, 3 days, maybe.
Yeah, and even then, like, I was able to get the information, like, it's literally like the driving time, you know what I mean? I don't think anything comes down to, you know, getting the approval or anything like that. It's literally like, I need to make an appointment to go see my customer and they're not available because they have a dentist appointment tomorrow, you know what I mean? Like, you have to you know, deal with that kind of stuff, but really, when it comes down to it, you know, the worst part, Shannon, is when they just get indignant about getting me the information.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the problem really counts, right? When they're like, you just need to do it the way I am telling you to do it. And it's like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? Like, playing nice in the sandbox really, you know, does change the whole trajectory of your transaction.
Yeah.
So I have somebody right now who's like trying to like tell me I don't need the paperwork. I'm like, well, I can't help you. Sorry, man. So
this is kind of a specific situation, but we have a question. Can you put a living trust together, and when the trustor dies, can that property be passed on to the church without a tax obligation?
So is that because it's a non-taxable, yeah, I think that, you know, that would definitely be a question for a tax professional, but I do believe that is a true statement, that because because it's a church, you know what I mean?
I believe you could put instructions in your trust.
Yeah. So there would still be a document that needs to be recorded from the trust to the church and all that kind of good stuff, but you know, anything else?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So if there's a successor trustee, it needs to be recorded, or the trust needs to be changed to show that the successor trustee is now the signer, or it is in control.
Yeah, so you can amend your trust. I would imagine most attorneys, when they're amending it, they're just gonna go ahead and do the recordable document while they're at it. But the reality is that if it's just gonna be changed anyway, I am way cheaper than an attorney. I'm way cheaper than an attorney, you know what I mean? So I can do those documents through our escrow transaction if it's being dispersed, you know what I mean, if it's being sold.
Right, so if a parent passes away, I become the trustee, but I never go to the attorney to have it changed. I need to provide you a death certificate,
The certified copy of the death certificate and a copy of the trust.
copy of the trust,
And him as successor trustee.
showing,
Yeah, so what would happen is that and a lot of times when you are dealing with dead people, you really should be like looking at a copy of the death certificate also. And that's not, you know, and you can flat out say, the title company will need a certified copy of this, so that like the black and white copy doesn't fly, I'll need a blue copy.
Has to be that colored original, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
The texture, yeah. I think it's funny that these are the weird things that escrow people think of. It's a certified copy, but I don't need the copy, I need the certified.
Certified copy.
Come on.
Yeah.
The
Basically,
weird thing that's what people think of, so. But yeah, so that,
Christy?
Yeah.
Christy, can you hear me? Only because I'm
I
gonna
can
get
hear
out
you
of, okay, I'm gonna get out of service in just a second, but can you explain, after we've closed something that was taken out of the trust in order for them to, fit what the lender's instructions are, why we do not put it back in the trust for them because our agreement with the lender?
So our job is to ensure who the actual borrower is. We're ensuring that. We're giving a title policy to the lender that says this is who the borrower is. Unfortunately, because of things that have gone very poorly in the past, I can no longer assist in drawing up documents after the fact. We do have document preparers that we, refer out to, but the reason why is because when something goes sideways, the document was not drawn properly, if there was a 2 instead of a 3, I mean, it can be really minimal stuff. There are all kinds of bad things that can come back to the person who prepared the document in the first place. So for one, we do not get in the middle of drawing documents after the fact anymore. And it's just, and it's one of those no good deed goes unpunished type situations. So, we wish we could help. We do have access to blank documents. We always recommend that you reach out to somebody who's been trained to draw the documents in the first place. So. All right, anything else?
Okay, all right, if you think of something else, just reach out to Christy or your sales exec and they'll get you that specific answer. There are no bad questions up front. And the more questions up front the more likely your transaction will be smooth. So thank you, Christy. And that concludes our class today. Thank you for attending. And we
Did you say you were going to share your list as well? Of your
I have
probate?
this, do you shoot me an email? It's
Okay.
Christy.Kutka@ctt.com, and I have a little list that I've accumulated over the years. And
Yeah,
you can-
actually, several people have asked for that, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna get with
yeah.
Christy and we're gonna massage it and make it look pretty.
Oh, I'm gonna have a nice list.
You're gonna have a nice list.
She can say
Keep the not nice ones right now.
But I give out.
And within a day or so, we should have a pretty list
Okay, perfect.
available.
Could you repeat the email we need? Oh, hold on. Something happened with my.
Christy.Kutka, so it's CHRIST. Oh, sorry.
I didn't
Well,
know,
let me, I can share that.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah, oh, look, there it is, right there. My mug shot and everything.
Show you, you gotta go back.
Kutka.
Down here. clear.
Are you gonna display that email real quick?
That's it.
Alright,
It's like, I'm
very
very
much.
No, no.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
I was gonna have, like, I was gonna have. You guys have- No, it was clear, it was clear. Yeah. You just have a
Email.